I said I wrote.
Oh, okay. So you're like going into it.
Well, I already know that I'm resistant to the subject. Like I was resistant to the subject last week. So I guess how do you arrive here is like by bridle.
Bridal? What do you mean bridal?
Like, you know how a horse has a bridle on it? I mean, a bit or a hakma. Oh, anyway, so it either has a bridle on it so that you can lead it where you need it to go.
Ah, okay. Yes. When you said that, it's like you also arrive here by resistance. Maybe because you're
Yes.
forced
Oh,
part
yeah.
or
Major resistance.
but you still have to guide it. Like, come on, the food in the water is.
Yeah, I just don't know if I want to. Okay, let's talk about vulnerability. Like last week, let's go with like, oh, hello, John. John the photographer. Welcome. Okay.
Ah,
So we're talking about vulnerability.
yeah. So we're talking about like we before we got on the live, right? We were talking about different types of vulnerabilities. Where one feels like it's sharing our story, it's sharing our experiences, maybe like our upbringing, our suffering, and being able to share that just out loud. And the other part, which I think that maybe you and I are both working on, is a vulnerability of
Well,
like,
I don't like to be put on the spot. I don't like to be put on the spot in front of people. And it reminds me of how I used to get punished when I was a child. And I
okay.
didn't realize I really had to work through a lot of shit. Trust me.
Oh, yeah.
so, so when you asked me such a fucking simple question, but it triggered me back into like my parental upbringing. And so that was like a very structured, let's say structured. Structure is a great word, right? Because they had a lot of constructs that they wanted me to live by. I grew up in a time where I had to put a book on my head and walk heel
Mm.
toe so that
Oh,
that way I could go up and down a parquet
oh,
hallway. So
it,
yeah, so it was kind of intense that way.
okay. Yeah. So it makes sense as to why, like, and just
Why I
in,
why I treated it like it was an attack and it wasn't. What it was a simple question. You asked me if I forgot something.
okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna here's how my reaction went. My reaction went full tilt mushroom implosion. All right. Just and it all went inside. And I thought, wow, does she like here's the series. I know it's not one thought at a time. Okay. So here's like all, not all, here's some. It
Yeah.
was, does she think I'm old? Now people think I'm old because I'm like, I forget shit. Oh God. Now look. And I know when I felt like that when I was, and then, and I'll,
So, so when you're saying it, it's
people
like,
forget shit. It's okay, Narita. People
no, no,
forget shit. And I had to come to that understanding.
but we also have two different perspectives because I wasn't even thinking about that at all. Like, I'm until you said it right now. Like, I thought it was because I was like, hey, like, there's something off. I don't know if I want to do this. And I thought,
I was off.
but I was,
I was just off.
but it was actually a question of like, hey, did you forget? Or, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
Yeah, I
two
know
different,
you were being super generous. It wasn't like a bad question. But here's like what goes on in my life, all right? Here's what goes on in my life. So my daughter moved down to the Yucatan, and before she moved, she tells me this. She goes, "Hey mom, when you start like forgetting things, would you like for us to remind you?" And I think to myself, I go, "Oh God, am I forgetting shit? Am I forgetting shit? Am I forgetting shit? Am I forgetting shit?" And
yeah,
and and she goes, "No." I go, "Why are you asking me that?"
yeah, yeah.
So that question, I'm like, obviously, I'm working on that question. I'm working on, am I going to start forgetting shit? I would really like to let that go. I'm just going to let that shit go.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because I think it goes back to like also in those ways where it's like there's trust in yourself that you're not going to forget, or if you do, you're also human.
Forgiving. Yeah, becoming forgiving. I think vulnerability really needs space,
It
right?
does. But I think even like the second part of the vulnerability that I was talking about, I think it also needs safety. because in those instances, we are being attacked. It resonate with you so much because I'm working on it through too, where in those spaces I don't feel safe and I feel like I have to protect myself and fight back. It's not even like protection and fight back. Like it's
Right.
both.
Right.
But I don't feel safe. But it's like I'm learning, and I think because I mentioned like Daryl, my partner, calls me out on it,
Mhm.
and we've been together for a while now, where I'm starting to feel more and more safe. So it's like, oh, he's giving me the space to be vulnerable, and there's no reaction. And I had to like I'm doing my own stuff, and for me it was like, oh, when I was a kid, I never had the space to be vulnerable. Like I talked to my therapist about it, and she asked me to go back to the moment where I was vulnerable and it was okay. And I stood and I was like laying on the table and I was quiet, and she was like, and she kind of went back. She was like, oh, like a teenager, like maybe a kid. And I was like, never. Like I was never allowed to simply be vulnerable or be in those spaces of in the raw feeling and it be okay. It was always I'm in trouble because I'm being like in the feeling, like I'm
You're too
being
expressive. You're not following whatever the rule is.
yeah, it's like shut up. Like be
Yeah, I heard that word a lot.
yeah. Yeah.
God, that was like, oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So oh gosh, wow, that just opened up. Thanks. Okay, I'm ready. Let's dive into all the shit.
Yeah. So it's like so the question arises too, and it's super cool. And I think it's I love this so much because it's like, oh, we're in this space of like growing together. And it's in those spaces together because it's like, oh, like cool, we're vibing. We're learning.
Right. Right. We're
So,
showing that across generations there's still stupid shit that happens.
oh yeah, that
Right?
too. Yeah.
Hi Angie. I didn't say hi to Angie, but she said good morning. Good morning.
Mm,
Okay, so vulnerability. This is what we would like for our audience to do. Okay, we're going to start talking about like different situations, obviously, that we have experienced or are experiencing currently that make us feel vulnerable. And we're going to touch on safety because safety is a big deal, right? And that's like, you know what? When you look at your childhood and you look for safety, a lot of times you won't find it and you won't realize it.
mm,
You won't realize it. You won't realize that you're not finding safety. And safety is like how we give ourselves the ability, that's like the word or the feeling, the ability or the permission to open ourselves in a moment, right? We have to
yeah.
feel safe, right? And so depending, and we feel safe in a lot of different spaces, but we don't know how to make ourselves safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Because I guess that it does start with us too, right? Like
Yeah.
us feeling safe within maybe like our body or yeah.
Well, with there, oh, where do you want to start, girl? Go ahead, pick a
Oh,
subject.
that's even,
You said vulnerability today. I was like, oh God, here we go. I'm just gonna do it.
let's do it.
Just gonna do it.
Where is like where you struggle the most with vulnerability?
Probably the subject, admitting that I'm vulnerable, that I'm easily attacked, because that's how it translates to me.
Yeah.
Okay. That's that word. That word translates to easily attacked to me. That's what it means to me. My vibration feels it that way. That's not what it means.
Just with the word vulnerability.
That's that's how
Okay.
I read it. So that lets me know that I have a lot to work through, right?
Okay. Yeah, because vulnerability equals an attack for you.
Well, okay, hold on one second. What I mean is this, right? Is it when we have a word, right? When we have a word that we're working with, that word carries a certain frequency, and that frequency is going to have a lot of meaning to you. All right. So this particular word means that to me. That's what it means to me. So that obviously tells me that that's not vulnerability, that's fear. That lets me know that I have to work through that particular word till I can like accept it as it's like as it is, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes what I'll do is I'll look the word up when I have such a dystopia sort of
Okay.
moment, right? So let's see. So
Oh,
vulnerable to meaning, right? Oh, capable or suspect or susceptible to being attacked, damaged, or hurt. I guess I'm right. I guess I'm fucking right. Fuck
uh,
yeah! Fuck vulnerability. I'm good now. I can wall up just like that. I can wall the fuck up. Nobody can touch me. I like that. I'm so happy I read that. Okay, so here's the other one. Open to moral attack, criticism, temptation, etc. Open to assault, difficult to defend, willing, and then here it gets, you have to get down like halfway before you start to see the connotation. All right. Here's the connotation: willing to show emotion or to allow one's weaknesses to be seen or known. And that's after all of the attacking stuff. All right.
okay.
So
And
that's why vulnerability feels that way. That's why it fucking feels that way, because that's what it is. You feel like you're under attack. So,
okay.
how would you, I guess, so let's see. The next one is of a person or population. This one says needing supportive or protective social services and community resources because of advanced age. Well, we won't go into that because that's about me again. Anyway, so bridge having won one of the games of a robber or whatever. I don't know. See, then it just digresses.
Okay.
So, okay, so tell me what vulnerability means to you. Now that we have like all of that, right? If you're being vulnerable, right? In a conversation, right? We are all 100% of the time vulnerable. We don't like to think we are.
Yeah, that's
Somebody else is going to have an opinion, right?
yeah. I do agree that. I do agree with that that at some point everybody is vulnerable in their own way. Right? Because I think vulnerability is also like what's vulnerable to me could be very different to you. And I think the extension of it too, it's like if my thought of vulnerability is like this much, yours could be this much. Right? Like I think there's different levels of it. Like like one of the things that pops up that I hung out with one of my friends and she's thinking about going back to therapy and stuff like that. And I was like, I'll go with you. Like I'll do a session if it makes you feel easier. And she was like, why are you so open to it? Like, you know, and it's like, oh, that's a different type of vulnerability where she's willing to go, has her own work through, but I'm willing to go like this much.
Right.
Right. That's what I mean a little bit. And then it works in opposite ways with like other people. But what was the question? You asked me like what vulnerable
What does vulnerability mean to you? Like, what does it mean to you?
for
Like,
a while.
because
I
I translated it to its direct meaning, but I had no idea that's what the meaning was. That's just what it felt like to me. And
yeah.
I'm really into word frequency, and I use a lot of different words when I'm healing and a lot of different things. So when I feel a word, it senses to me and it goes through, well, I allow it to go through energetically myself so that I can read it properly. And so that's why. So maybe when we are producing vulnerability, there's a different word for it. Like when we're becoming open, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But we're gonna feel the, you know what's funny? Here, let's really get into vulnerability, okay?
Because I
All
wanted to
right.
share what I thought. Like there's
Okay,
two
good.
before I thought vulnerability was like owning my story, like being open to my own experiences and being able to share them. And then it felt like vulnerability meant consistently reflecting and not being afraid as to what arose within me. Because there was a period in my life where like things would pop up and I wouldn't want to see it, right? I wouldn't want everybody else to see it. So it's okay, I'm not going to talk about it. So it
Okay.
became, okay, let me be aware of what's going on within me. And that became vulnerability. I think right now where I'm at in my life, it feels like being open to the anger and the sadness that does arise within me as they're happening. But not just like within myself, like by myself, but also with where like my partner, right? Like we've been together for a while and it's like to cry and to be expressive like that still feels very vulnerable. but it's like I want to learn, because I've learned that through vulnerability, like you also make so much more space for like love.
It's intimacy is what you're explaining.
Yeah, and it's like
Not,
even
you become vulnerable when you become intimate. So that's what you're talking about. You're talking about intimacy, how you start to open up and you're willing to go under attack, all right, to express who you are in that moment because you're starting to feel safe. That's intimacy.
oh, I want to add to that, right? Because it's so true. My therapist was asking me, like, oh, she was like, why don't you let go, like with this partner, right? Like, and it was so funny because she noticed me like holding on, and she was like, why are you, like, what if you let go? And what came up for me was like, in my relationship right now, it feels like whatever he does, like it won't hurt me. Like I know that I'll like be okay. Like I know that I'm like whatever, right? But and
Okay.
I was like, but if I let go, there's a sense of vulnerability where like now his actions can hurt me. And I don't want to be hurt that way.
Right.
So it
Yeah.
was like,
Exactly. So that's okay. So that's what vulnerability is. It's like a fear of being under attack, but you're opening yourself because you're going into intimacy. When you
mhm,
start to go into like different spaces of yourself and you become more comfortable, all right, this is for me a blanket statement. Okay. I feel that I I become more willing to be intimate and hold space with another individual because I've been through that part of my vulnerability to where like I've really heard myself and I'm going to give myself that grace, right? And you don't always on the first shot. You just don't. Sometimes you'll just stuff that right back in and you'll say, we're playing whack-a-mole for about 4 more years. And then whenever
yeah.
you show up again, then we'll work on that. And that's okay. Intimacy with self is very vulnerable because you find out who you are, you find out why you think that way. Because, or let's face it, if we want to get, so Manuel and I, when we first were together, I think we were like 3 months together
Uh-huh.
and we were a lot younger, okay? We were a lot younger. And he goes, I want to be intimate with you. And I go, right on. And he goes, no, I want to talk to you. I want you to share your dreams with me. And I was like,
Yeah, like immediately, right? Like just a whole wall. Like, no, that's not gonna
right,
happen.
right. Because I understood vulnerability. So yeah, so that's how I know it's intimacy. I know it's intimacy, and we don't know who we are because we're absorbing a lot of the world around us. So we'll absorb it as like, oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, that's a close up. So
I love you, Nessa. Thanks. Yeah. So for me, like being intimate is really finding out how you are in that moment and how you got there. Remember, that's what the show is about. So intimacy is very impactful to your life. It's how you feel in respect to the story that you're telling about yourself, the narrative that you're living, right?
yeah.
How intertwined are you with that? Are you in your body while you're having that experience? There's just like a lot to it.
I
So
have a I have a question for you, going back to
uh-uh.
like how did like going to like that space
Call
of
my antics.
the topic of the show, where do you see yourself, or where do you want to arrive with vulnerability?
Um,
Knowing what you know right now with
yeah.
the words and being so aware like logically of like where it is, like where do you want it to go, or where do you see yourself?
Oh, okay. Okay. So that's a great question for me because like how you framed it, and it's probably not even the question that you asked. Okay. So ask me the question again.
Okay. Well, now I want you to answer it. Hence, I asked.
Well, it was like because you dropped me into a space, right? And so in order to be vulnerable, you have to be inside your body,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
In order to be vulnerable, you have to be inside your body. And we talk about that, but we don't really say like what that means. And what we mean is that you bring in your awareness, like your understanding, whatever it is, however you think, into a feeling. And the feeling is sensory. That's sensory awareness. And we have that. And we bring it into sensory awareness. That's when vulnerability can be open. That's when you can become intimate, because now you're connecting your thoughtful mind and your heartful mind. And when you do that, you have two streams of energy giving you support. When you're
Okay.
in your thought and you become vulnerable, this is why this happened, right? I was in myself over a different reason. I felt
Yeah.
vulnerable in our conversation, right? And then
Mhm.
all of a sudden, I'm going to show up resistant because I'm not really wanting to look where I'm at.
Okay.
So it depends on, because I think, I don't like the word trigger, but trigger is very effective, right? I
Yeah.
think that we came up with challenge the other day, and I don't like challenge either. I don't like anything that's resistance. So fuck it.
Yeah.
And when I'm resistant, I know that I'm not vulnerable. I know I'm not intimate, right? I know I'm closing off a possibility.
Okay. So then I can ask you the question again. Yeah.
Okay.
So the question that I asked was, knowing with what you know, like where do you see yourself with vulnerability, or where would you like to be with
Well, I would
vulnerability?
like to not be triggered. Would you like to not be triggered in vulnerability? I would like to not be triggered.
Yeah. I also feel like being triggered is going to be like for the rest of our life, like
Oh
part of
yeah,
it.
well, we're in recognition of the triggers. So, and we're not all of them, but
Yeah.
everybody is in. There's like different practices in the world about how you do life. There's spiritual practices, religious practices, music practices, lifestyle practices. And
Yeah.
all of those are going to speak to your beliefs. And when you step outside of those, right, any kind of belief system or foundation that you've built
Yeah.
out of the constructs from your previous experience, you're going to feel some level of resistance. It's natural because it's change. That's
Yeah.
what it is. You're going into change. So when you're becoming vulnerable, change is there. We're resistant to change, but change is our constant.
Yeah.
So even though, because we get very sedentary, very, very experience, very like, oh, I'm really comfortable. What? I
Yeah.
have to move. It's like going halfway down the aisle and more people keep coming in and you're like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I got the perfect seat.
I don't want to. So then you would like to not be triggered. That's where you would like to arrive
Well, yeah.
with
What about
vulnerability.
you? Okay, so what about you with vulnerability?
Ooh. The thing that pops up for me is like acceptance. Like rather than resist, like what's there in the moment, I would love to arrive to the point where I accept that it's here and it's okay and it's passing through,
Right.
whatever it is.
You move to that. You move to that anyway. It's just not the first flag, but that's the flag you'd like first. Is acceptance, just like this. Oh, vulnerability. I'm good. What do you want to talk about? You know you're
Wait. What?
all that stuff's gonna be coming up. All that shit that you don't want to see, right in
Yeah.
that fucking moment, because it will have nothing to do with what the conversation is with the other individual.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to recognize that first so that we can hold our sacred space for ourselves and then
Oh,
not hold them accountable for our sacred space that we need to look at, right?
yeah. So it's being
So,
aware, like when it does happen with another individual.
yeah, well, it's going to happen. You could watch a Hallmark movie, you could watch anything you want, you could watch a commercial, okay? You could see a bird fly like this and it will trigger you and it puts you into your intimate space, your inner world. And when you're in your inner world, that's a different consciousness. It's a different reality. So not knowing that that's a different reality, when you go in there, you might feel vulnerable because stuff that you've absorbed and you really haven't processed yet, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what do you think about intimacy? Like, how do you build intimacy? How do you build that?
Man. If you, I don't know, like maybe consistently showing up where you're,
It's
because,
consistent vulnerability. That's what intimacy is.
oh, yes. See, I'm on the right step.
You are. You are. It sucks. It sucks. But that's how I learned that it's all fucking triggers. It's okay.
Yeah, because like what I heard before, where it's like sometimes it feels like an inconvenience. Like
It's
let me
inconvenient because it's going to
schedule like
happen.
years, let me schedule this. Like I don't have time for it right now. But it's like that's part of the resistance. Like that's part of not accepting. That's that's part of just pushing it aside.
Right?
So I would love to be in that space where it's like, oh, it's happening. I feel it. Like nothing else matters right now. Let me like be in it with
Right.
whoever. Because what happens with me too? It's like if I'm with another person.
Well, what happens? This is what I'm curious about. Okay. What
Uh,
happens when you're not with somebody else and you're in that vulnerable space for yourself of your choosing and you're becoming intimate and you're building that relationship with you and your inner world and your inner realities and your conscious realities, your subconscious realities, and, consciousness? How, you know, how does that feel?
I actually do sit with it when I'm by myself. Like I do sit with it and I'm like, okay, like I feel it, like I'm gonna cry or I'm like mad. I think I struggle with it when I'm with other people. And and I struggle with it because I know that it may be something that they're also asking back in forms of like connection. Or it's also something that I want. But how
Okay.
do but it's like how do I get past that? I don't have to be happy or like grateful all the time type of like energy. And it's like it's practice. Like I was talking to one of my best friends like a week or two ago, and like I just started to cry like on the voice memo, and I was like, hey, like I guess this is where I'm at, like I'm just gonna share it. And it was so cool because it felt like it gave her permission to also share, like, oh my god, I'm in the same place, and we were both crying together, and it felt like we hit a different part of our friendship.
Right.
So
That's
it's like
beautiful.
feels like it's like constant practice. Because it's like the immediate reaction is to not say anything, how's your day, like, and then go cry about it like in my own little bubble. So it's constant
Oh,
to be like, okay, like I feel safe, she's my best friend, like just fucking say it, like it's
right.
okay.
Right. I have friends. I have friends, right? That
Uh-huh.
like I have to have that kind of a relationship with, like, because I'm a very direct individual. And I'm gonna tell you shit. I'm
I
gonna
love
tell you shit because I expect for you to tell me shit. I won't
it.
like when you tell me shit, just like you don't like when I tell you shit, but we will be okay because like I'm seeing your shit and I'm seeing how it affects you, but you can do whatever the fuck you want. I have to express it in that moment, usually when I'm in a friendship,
Yeah.
because I feel like if I don't, I'm not doing my best as a person for them.
Mm, okay.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
And then, but wait, no, wait. Come on. There's a lot of layers to that because that's just a fucking reason, right? That's
Yeah.
just a fucking reason. And it seems very superior, don't you think? Like I would know better,
Okay.
right?
You
Okay.
know,
And,
I think I have a different perspective with that.
oh, okay. Go
But
ahead.
I'm done with yours though.
No. That's fine. Go ahead.
Okay, because what pops
Mhm.
up that part of that, it feels like you're in a way like walking each other home or walking each other to the best part of yourself, where it's like I'm gonna call it out because I'm outside of your bubble, like, hey, I see your wall, but I'm not gonna judge you for it. Like I'm just gonna share my opinion, and that's like your own work to see if it resonates or if it doesn't resonate with you.
Yeah. I usually, it depends.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm able, maybe it's because of how I choose to like live, maybe that has a
Yeah.
lot to do with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that has a lot to do with it. So if I'm seeing something, I'm gonna if I see a pattern that they're talking about that's detrimental in their life, I will become Captain Obvious.
Okay. Okay.
All right. And if it's usually only when somebody is saying, this is happening, 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 this is happening. And what I've learned is that I don't have to take on that energy and I could ask questions. I can say, well, what are you going to do about that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And that helps me not try to auto accommodate or um
Like feel
or
responsible.
solve their fucking world. I don't have to do that. Right.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, okay, so last week, this is perfect. Okay. So last week we go live. All right. And that's after we're like this, but we aren't. I am. That's what I'm feeling. Okay. And we get a little vulnerable and you say, well, I don't know if I want to do this. And I go, nope, I'm good. And I'm still processing a trigger in that moment of being old and forgetful and whatever it is. Okay. So
Okay.
mostly I think what it is getting to know yourself as far as vulnerability goes. It says, hi, Amanda. Do you think the level of people's vulnerability also have to do with their attachment style? Okay, the attachments, go ahead. Go
I feel like
ahead,
it does.
Rita. So
I feel
attachments are a lot of different things, right? And if you have attachments, those are constructs. So those constructs keep you safe and you've created them for a reason. Okay. And the reason is because you don't want to be vulnerable in certain spaces. And
okay.
you're deconstructing things that you've built over a lifetime. So they're not attachment styles. Let's see, do with their attachment styles. If somebody's developed an attachment for you that you are feeling depleted in, then you need to come up with some healthy boundaries for interaction. That means that you're going to the table and you're you're depleting yourself before you even get there, right? So let's I want you to look at that question for me, okay, Narita?
See,
Okay,
do you,
because I have a lot about it, but I just want to I want to hear like what your thoughts are. You want me to read it to you? Or did you read it?
I read it. Yeah.
Okay.
That pops up. I know that there's like that whole avoidant and insecure attachment styles, right? And I feel like it does have to do with like vulnerability. Yeah, the avoidant, fearful, anxious, like the theories. That's what pops up. And I feel like it does have a lot to do with it. Like I feel like the avoidant, fearful attachment, they for sure fuck vulnerability. Like if they're not even aware of it, it's like I don't want anything to do with it. Like they walk away, they're like, we'll talk about it later, they push it under the rug. I feel like anxious attachment, I feel like they're more vulnerable than the avoidant. But I think it's because they're anxious. So they're willing to just like share their feelings and their thoughts and like share everything that's going on. So I feel like it does have something to do with like the level of vulnerability.
Okay. Well, the level of willingness,
Willingness, yeah, there you go. The
right?
level of the vulnerability.
Willingness. That's what it is. You're a very willful person and you're willing to do certain things, and your will is what sets up your walls. All right. So
But
if
I think you have to work through it, right? Like
you
because
absolutely can, those are our triggers, right?
yeah,
Those
which
are
makes
the reasons that we make those constructs.
yeah, that's what I was
I
gonna go
want to
back.
speak to something else about this though.
Mhm.
Okay. So we're observing an individual. Okay. But what about us in that same situation? We're matching them energetically. All right.
Mhm.
Because, I was taught if you spot it, you got it. If you
Yeah.
spot it, you got it. So if you
Mhm.
spot it, you got it. So if
Mhm.
you're talking about another individual, that's no problem. Okay. But you're also talking about you because it's a sandwich.
Mhm. Yeah. That's why I feel like I'm like I
Sandwich.
know because the avoidant and fearful, that's totally me.
Right. Oh
Like
yeah, because I'm going to notice what I resonate and know. I'm going to
mhm.
notice those things. And so I think that if I am avoidant or fearful, okay, I'm going to do that in a lot of areas of my life. But that's very blanket right there. Even if you say avoidant and fearful, there's like so much in it, right? And then there's that is not that, like those attachments that are avoidant and fearful, right? They stem from generational upbringing.
Mhm.
That's what they come from. They don't come from a person's inability to become vulnerable. It's their ability to wall up enough to where they don't feel that way,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So I think that I don't know. I've just noticed it between you and I when we get on here, right? I have like different things that'll come up and I'll go, oh, wow. And I know that we're resonating. I know that the reason that we're coming on here is that we're very similar, right? So I just
Yeah.
have a feeling that we work through a lot of the same shit at the same time.
Yeah. There's a lot of aha moments after, like we say, or for me, it's like I say stuff and
Yeah,
I'm like, okay, like I'm there, or like that's where I'm at.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like something you'll say, and then it's like, oh shit, that was an aha moment. Like that resonates. Let me reflect on that for a bit.
Yeah, because I go watch them.
Yeah.
I go watch. That's how I know when my behavior's fucked. So,
You're funny.
well, okay. So, like, I did a lot of years of writing, right? A lot of writing. And the writing was about me and my experiences and how I felt about them, who I thought did what to me,
Okay.
how I thought that fucking happened, and how everything was very external in a lot of that writing at first. And then it became internal, more internal, more internal, because first you have to eliminate what you think outside is causing anything for you, because it's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that that is part of vulnerability as well, is that when you're looking at something that makes you feel vulnerable, it's because the lens that you're using is what you're working on in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just what I think.
Yeah. I want to share because my phone's gonna die. It's at 2%. So I
Okay.
don't want to go blank.
Oh, okay. Well, that was really good. Thank you, Amanda, for those. Like, that was really good finish. That was
Yeah.
I
Oh,
appreciate it. Appreciate it. Okay. So how about if we just wrap it up then? Okay. So your phone don't die.
okay. Okay. Or just so it doesn't go poop. Okay.
Right. Because I don't want to end up I don't want to be vulnerable all by my fucking self. And then I'll have to fill the void. I'll probably be here for another fucking hour and a half trying to clean up where I stepped on myself. You know what I mean? Fuck that.
Yeah.
So
No.
I'm
Whatever we.
good. I
Okay.
like I like the subjects. I like the subjects. I really like intimacy,
Okay.
right? And I
Yeah.
like how everything is winding back to self. And I really appreciate how we're holding space to get to these conclusions. And what about you, Miss Narita?
Yes. I love that we're showing up. Like I love that. Like even though there is resistance sometimes and it has nothing to do with, you know, this or you and I, it's like we're still coming up into work through the vulnerability and work on whatever we have to work on, whatever pops up.
Right. I hope you have a great week and I'll see you next Sunday, right?
Yes, I'll be here.
Bye, guys.
Bye.